Brian O'Neill came up there. Of course, this is like 7 in the evening, 7:30. And Brian O'Neill, the administrator, came up, and he took Landy down to the office. Landy was ranting and raving, and the director of nursing took me to her office. And she said, "This is between you and I." And she said, "Luke is very, very, very sick. He has MRSA, which is multi-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. He has pseudomonas pneumonia. He has a urinary tract infection, that was why his sheets were bloody, and that was going on there. And he has Clostridium difficile, which means his bowels were totally stopped up. And this was this is all life-threatening. The next day I called Health South Home Office. I told them what all Luke had. I wanted someone down there now. They wanted to take him to the hospital the night before. Landy refused. I said I was calling an ambulance, and they said, "We'll just have to send the ambulance away because you're not the temporary guardian." And so Home Office came down. My sister called CDC. They came down, and needless to say, Health South was very upset. They called Bill and I into the office and said, "We don't like this kind of exposure, and we'd like to keep Luke here." And Brian O'Neill said, "Luke is what we call a patient of convenience. We want to keep him here by all means, but if you cause problems like this, then we're going to have him placed somewhere else." And he said that by meaning a patient of convenience meant that he was 100% paid for, that he couldn't make any trouble because he couldn't really use the call button and couldn't yell for help, and so they could check on him whenever they needed to. And of course, Medicare or Medicaid paid for everything, and it was convenient for them. And of course, I just burst into tears. I just couldn't even believe that they could even tell me that they could even say that. And my husband sat and talked with him, and of course, when I came out of the restroom and tried to stop crying and pull myself together, he said, "Well, now that you've done this, your visitation is only going to be one night a week, and you're only going to get to see your son 4 hours a week, and because we can't have this kind of exposure. And so if your car tires are on this parking lot before 1 minute to 4, then you will not get to see your son that night." And earlier, Carla would beg me and say, "Oh, you can come up tomorrow around 2 and see Luke and watch him work out. Watch him do his therapy and all." And so I would believe them, and of course I was still kind of talking with Landy, and so I would go up there at 2, and Carla would immediately leave, go to Brian, and tell him that I was up there and I wasn't supposed to be there, and it was 2 o'clock and I was 2 hours early. And when I went and Brian would bring me in his office, I said, "No, Carla said I could come. She said that I could come and watch him." Carla said, "I didn't say that. She's lying." And they would just set traps after trap. And of course, Beverly would come up there on my night and bring up her friend and say, "Oh, isn't he looks just like the Humphreys, doesn't he? Just like him." And she would just hug him and kind of, brush his hair and do all this so that I couldn't have time to even talk with Luke. So I left, and I went up to this nurse supervisor at the other end of the hallway. And she was older. She was probably my age. And I told her that, Beverly would not let me get near Luke. And, it was my only 4 hours I had to visit with him that week. And so she came down there, and she told BJ that, you need to leave. And of course, BJ said, "No, it says my son wrote these visitation guidelines, and he said that all visitors that she could visit and any other family members could visit." And the nurse supervisor said that meant her family members. This is one night. She gets to see her son 4 hours a week, and we've designated this is the time just for her and her family, for the maternal side, to visit, because we were having too many problems before, and we don't need incidents like this, and you need to leave. And so BJ argued with her some, and she said she was just very firm and said, "You are going to leave." And she told her that her and her friend needed to leave. And so as she was leaving, she walked up the hallway and said, "She's a pervert, she's a pervert. Don't trust her, she shouldn't be left alone with him." And she was just yelling up the hallway, and the nurse was taking her out, and they exited her out the door. And of course, when the nurse supervisor was coming back down the hall, all the people were in the hallways, and she was telling them, "It's okay, everything's all right, just everything calm down, it's all right," and had them all go back into their rooms. And she came in and she told me, she said, "Honey, we're on your side." and they wanted to be kind to me, and they tried, but there were so many stipulations that I wasn't to be left alone. I was to be watched constantly. They were constantly looking in on me, and it was just a fiasco. After that happened, that was around June 23rd, and CDC put him in isolation, and then the nursing home requested that Luke leave. Well, they didn't request that Luke leave, actually. The family decided that they wanted to move Luke. And so on July 11th, they set up a transfer for Luke to go to TIR, which is Texas Institute of Research and Rehabilitation in Houston. They got Luke in the ambulance on July 11th, and when Luke got to Lufkin, he was just throwing up so badly and so sick that they had to turn around in Lufkin and bring him back to Health South. The following day, they finally got his stomach settled down, and they transferred him to TIR in Houston. Well, it just so happened that the following day was my day, my visitation day. They set my visitation day then every Thursday, and that was my one day. And since I caused all these problems, my visitation was, cut to one day since I called. We called the CDC, and also my one day was Thursday. Well, I drove up there, and as I got to Tyler, and I was close to Health South, my phone rang, and it was Brian O'Neill, and he said, "Well, Susan, don't come today." And I said, "Well, I'm just a mile from the center." And he said, "Well, you need to call your attorney." And I said, "Well, what is the matter?" And he said, "You just need to call your attorney." So I got off the phone, I called my attorney. Of course, he wasn't in the office. I couldn't reach him. I called him back, and I said, "I can't reach my attorney. What is going on?" He said, "Well, don't come because Luke isn't here." And I said, "Well, where is Luke?" He said, "Well, I can't tell you that. You're going to have to find out through your attorney." So again, Luke was transferred, and I wasn't to know where he was.